Are there enough of these customers? Again, what's your addressable market? How much do you need? And this is the piece I said earlier about actually talking to customers, confirming the market, particularly pricing. So often people either underprice, you're pricing it on a cost plus basis, or you're pricing it on a value added basis. Those are really important questions. Don't underprice something, particularly if it's got an edge in the market that is better than the competition. And be careful at discounting in order to try and get into the market. Unless you're a really large organization, the ability to finance losses by effectively trying to undercut your competitors can be a recipe for disaster. And also, what do you do when they follow suit and they've got bigger budgets than you have? And as I said, is the market price high enough? Key piece, I think, in the marketing process is how do customers find out about you? There are a lot more ways of getting known today than there might have been 10 or 20 years ago, and much wider. There are people overseas that you can reach rather than just in your locality. And again, this ideal customer, what do they look like? What is their buyer journey? Some people might take 6 months to buy your product. Some people might make an instant decision. And how do they make that decision? And how often do you have to talk to them? These are all important questions. The other piece around people switching from competitor products, I was involved in a project some years ago where we underestimated the market dominance of the major supplier. We underestimated the fact that they talked to the people who held the purse strings, whereas we tended to talk to the users. And so we actually ended up pitching to the wrong people. And that meant that though we thought we were better technically, we didn't actually make the sales that we thought we were going to make. Do you have channels to market? Is it just direct sales? Do you sell through other people? Understanding the channels that you have and understanding how you're going to operate them and how you're going to make them effective. And the sales process, which is different to marketing, I think marketing is much more around people knowing what you do, what you have, and who you are. The sales process is much more proactive. And this again is where the sales pipeline becomes really, really important. And as I said earlier, it's important into the underlying fundraising process. The more you have, I talked earlier about a appointment of a sales director who just transformed the sales pipeline. We went from having less than $1 million in the sales pipeline to having over 10. And that formed huge basis for the refinancing of the business ultimately. So don't underestimate the importance of the sales pipeline process. And again, communication to customers, having the right strategies, developing the strategies, documenting the strategies, understanding who's doing what in the business around those. Social media obviously is much more important than it used to be. Traditional media is still relevant. There's still opportunities, particularly on television, to get yourself more well-known. Exhibitions are coming back again. We've got face-to-face exhibitions that are more popular. Webinars like this one, they're a way of getting yourself well-known. And I think the important piece around a CRM system to manage all your leads and keep track of where everybody is and where everyone is in the process, so that you don't drop the ball and miss and lose some sales. Finally, the piece that I think I find is from an accountant's perspective is really valuable is understanding the business model. What are you selling? How much does it cost? How much is the profit margin? Particularly in early stage businesses, having a high profit margin is helpful because you have to sell less of it to break even. Having a much lower profit margin means you have to sell a lot more to break even, and it might be difficult. Having some idea of some stab at the next 3 years, the more you're in business and you've got a track record, the easier it is to project forward. And you can start to say, well, we sold 3 million, 5 million last year. We've been growing at 20% a year, so that means we should grow at 20% next year. That's helpful. And out of the projections of sales is derived, obviously, the projections of the overall profitability of the business. So that enables it to make sure that the overheads don't get out of hand, because that's the other piece, either overheads or capital investment. Or if they are at risk of getting out of hand, you have to look at how you're going to finance them, which comes back to the investment piece and the investment message and the ultimate payback. The question around, is your profitability high enough, or are the projections of your sales high enough? And if they're not, then you get the opportunity to go around and look at why and what else you could do to get them to the right level, so that you are making profit, the cash flows are positive. So you play the what if games at that point. Obviously, cash flow forecasts and cash flows are really important, and they are based around certain assumptions around when you get paid and who you pay and when you pay your suppliers and staff, etc. And particularly if you've got capital investment, where those are coming out of your cash flows. And that enables you to see where the holes are in the cash flow, if there are any, and what you might do about any adverse cash outflows. And so finally, do you have enough cash, and what you're going to do about it if you don't? Key piece here is this whole issue of having enough time and putting aside enough time in order to get both the business plan and the fundraising undertaken. If you're running a business and doing the business planning at the same time, it's going to take you much longer to complete it, and therefore it might take you a month or two to get all of the bits and pieces together, and you have to do that before you start the fundraising process. I raised £1 million in 2009, and it took us 2007, and it took us 3 months from start to finish. I digress, sorry. We got a decision in 3 months, and then it took us 3 months from getting the yes to doing the due diligence and everything else and getting the money. So it took us about 6 months altogether. And it's very difficult to get decisions on fundraising in under 3 months, and the due diligence process and the other negotiations are on top of that. So don't underestimate the time, allocate the time. I believe that professional advice or help, some extra capacity is important. I do have a business planning template that I can send anyone who's interested. The other thing I would say is make sure you have a budget, because the likelihood is that if you can't do it all yourself, you will need to bring other people in. Some people will do things on a success fee only. Most people don't, but make sure that you can cover all the expenses. I had somebody recently who'd spent a lot of money on a business plan, but then couldn't pay something else that was crucial to getting to a point of where he could go for funding. He also didn't really have clarity around who might fund the business, and I felt that some of the advice he'd been given around what the forecast should look like, it showed losses for nearly 4 years, and I felt that having a business or trying to fund a business which was going to lose money for 3 years was actually going to make it harder to get people to say yes, they wanted to take the risk. And I think that's the key piece, is understanding that the investor is taking a risk on your business, to minimize the risk that they're taking, to appreciate their risk, and to make sure that there's an adequate return for the risk that you're asking them to take. There are plenty of people around who are prepared to take a risk, but they've got a lot of options. So the business plan needs to be compelling, needs to have a clear plan, and it needs plenty of time to be able to get it to a point where it's usable. So I think that those are the important pieces.